At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Hey, Catastrophic Failure listeners. We're back with one final episode as promised. I'm Jessica Marshall, here with Times Union reporter Larry Rulison. I did not know any of the 20 people who died in that limo crash on October 6th, 2018. Neither did Larry. In his 6 years of reporting on the case, and in my time producing this podcast, we learned a lot about them. But it was always in the context of how they died. We saw or heard their names more times than I can count. They were written in newspapers, in court documents. They were read aloud in court countless times, in alphabetical order by last name.
For causing the death of Savannah Bercese.
Savannah Bercese was always first. Michael Ukai, he was always the last.
Causing the death of Patrick Cushing.
It took 10 minutes alone to read those names in the 20-count guilty verdict against Nauman Hussein back in May of 2023.
With respect to the conviction under count 6 of manslaughter in the second degree for causing the death of Robert J. Dyson.
So this last episode, we decided, would be dedicated to the lives that they lived before they became the victims of the Schoharie limo crash. Larry Rulison and I have been working on this podcast for a year and a half now. It's been a year and a half of really intense production. And being that this is our final episode, we thought it was appropriate to sit down one more time and share some thoughts. You more than me, obviously, because you've been covering this for a lot longer and you've sat through a lot more of the trial and all of the sort of court proceedings that happened in the last 5 years. We have heard the names read aloud a lot.
They had to repeat the names like every time they mentioned the indictment to the jury or just in court. It was excruciating because it takes longer than you think. I mean, it's so unusual, right, to have 20 victims in one case. So it was, you know, and you hear the names and there's sort of like a silence after, you know, where people are just sort of like, oh. Yeah. You can feel the pain, and then, you know, a lot of it was a formality, but it's like a bell, church bell or something, like just ding, ding. I mean, they're all, you know, burned into our memories, right?
You know, what did you always wonder about when you were reporting?
Yeah, you know, it's so hard because I'm always writing, the victims. I mean, as much as I could, I would try to throw in stories I would do, at least some details. I mean, these are real people. They're not just 20, names. They're people who had lives. They were young. Honestly, until I met the families, I knew very little about each of these individuals, except for what, we had some great reporters out there who knocked on doors and found people and talked to them and learned about them. But for me, honestly, I was just churning so much stuff out. I felt bad after a while that I'd never really gotten to know them. So when we eventually had the families in, it felt like a good thing that had to happen. And for, especially for you and I to write about this, you really got to know who these people were.
That's what we're endeavoring to do with this episode a little bit more. Obviously, we can't devote a full episode to each person, or, we can't write a novel about it. But we do want to get to know them. And part of that was reaching out to their families, which, is, for me, I don't know, I'm assuming that you have the same feeling, is extraordinarily difficult as a reporter. I remember the first time I ever had to do something like that. I was in journalism school, actually, and my professor that I was working with basically forced me to call the family of an infant that had died to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And of course I got hung up on, which it was basically like a door slammed in my face. Yeah. And that, that hurts me emotionally. I don't like the conflicted feelings that I felt about it, because on the one hand, it was a story that was of local, importance, and you have to report on it. You have to do these things. But at the same time, you feel like an asshole, for a lack of a better word, invading these people's privacy. You feel like you are re-traumatizing them in a way. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
You learn that pretty quickly in a newsroom where you have to go call someone whose family member just died. I mean, it's very hard. I used to think myself, what would I do if my kid just died and one of the Times Union reporters came and knocked on my door? It'd be, I don't know, I wouldn't want to talk to him, right?
Our decision to reach out to the families to make this podcast was very much grounded in the idea that not so much we wanted to have these people relive their tragedy for the sake of, entertainment, which, is horrifying at the thought, but it was to the end of what we just said, which is we really wanted to make sure that we personified these victims, right? Talk to their parents, talk to their siblings, talk to their friends about who they were when they were alive, as opposed to the tragedy that has defined their lives for everybody.
Yeah, there's lots of times when I just, wanted to just not even touch the phone, just let them be. Yeah, those are the hardest calls. I mean, there were some families that were more willing to speak than others. Try to be respectful as possible without being, ignoring our duties or our job.
Right, and give every family the chance, or every, connection to every victim, the chance to say something. Right, as opposed to demanding that they say something. Right. Just let them know, we just want you to know that, what we're doing is to highlight the lives of the victims, and we want you to know that you have the chance, to speak with us about it. We're not going to pressure you. We did not want them to feel pressured or re-traumatized in any way. Yeah. Of course, there were some folks who did not respond at all. There were also some families who said, please leave us alone, respect our privacy, which we absolutely, have done. And what we have, I think, the families that we were able to talk to, I think we got a very fulfilling picture of the lives of their loved ones. And we were able to kind of ask about some of the others and how they had relationships together, because this was kind of the people in the limo were kind of like one big family, right? All friends, very close friends. They were in each other's weddings. They grew up together in some cases. There were ways of kind of making sure we got everyone, a picture of everyone.
Everyone had a great story. It was amazing, actually, when you sit down and learn about a person's life. To me, it was great. It was the most positive part of this experience, I would say, almost learning these people's lives and their dreams. Like the parents, we'd ask them, if they were still alive, what would they be doing today? And
Yeah.
I think the parents, it was nice to hear the hopefulness, even though that all was lost.
We're going to take a short break.
Why is healthcare so expensive? What's happening with climate change? And are elections safe? You can find answers to those questions and a lot more with Capitol Confidential from me, Dan Clark. I give you the latest news and analysis from the state capitol and beyond. Sign up now at CapitolConfidential.com. That's Capital with an O, confidential.com.
You're listening to Catastrophic Failure. How do you tell the stories of 20 people in one podcast episode? As we said before, we feel that each of their lives deserves episodes in and of themselves, or novels, or full-length feature films. But we don't have the capacity to do that, unfortunately. All we can really do is tell their stories here, and you could read more about them on timesunion.com. These 20 people share an indelible connection as victims of a crash. But many of them were already connected in life. The natural place to start is with Amy Steenberg. She's the tie that binds the limo's passengers together. Her 30th birthday celebration was the reason that they all got into that limo on October 6th, 2018. 3 of the passengers were Amy's sisters. 2 of them were her brothers-in-law. Some, like Amanda Rivenberg, were college friends. Others, like Matthew Coons, Savannah Bersesi, and Michael Ukai, were friends that had come into her life through her new husband, 29-year-old Axel Steenberg. They'd been married just 4 months prior. Many of the people in the limo were at their wedding in June.
Axel, there's no love song sweeter than ours. You have showed me what true love is. I dream of us growing old and traveling the world hand by hand. I love you always, Mrs. Steenberg.
That's Amy in her wedding video. She's sitting on a couch, practicing her vows before the ceremony. Her long blonde hair was gracefully swept to one side. It fell in perfect ringlets over her right shoulder. Her makeup was flawless. She was wearing a white silk robe. I'd only seen her in photos before watching this, but with the video, she came alive for a brief moment. We were very grateful to her mother-in-law, Janet Steenberg, for sending us this video, because it allowed us to get to know some of the victims in the closest way that we ever could, in actual living color. Amy was going to turn 30 4 days after the crash. Her birthday was October 10th. She grew up in Amsterdam, New York. She was the baby in a family of 7 kids. She was petite, a talented soccer player. She was a registered nurse. At the time that she died, she'd been working toward a master's degree in nursing home administration.
Throughout the years, she started to go to nursing school. And when she was in nursing school, I really felt like that became her boyfriend. Like that became everything to Amy. She was so focused.
Her sister, Allison King, 2 years her senior, at 31 years old, was the maid of honor at the wedding. That's her delivering her speech to the bride and groom at the reception.
She meets Axel and first me, like, I'm a protective older sister. And I'm like, all right, who is this guy coming to protect, like... And then she calls me up and she's like, Al, I can see myself marrying this guy. And the day that I met him, I met...
Allie, as she was called, was almost a mirror image of her sister. She had the same blonde hair, big blue eyes, and smile. She had a communications degree and worked for a local wholesale distribution company. She was an avid organic gardener. According to her obituary, she was a dog lover who took great pride in raising chickens and ducks. She would frequently bring fresh eggs to her family. She was engaged to be married. Her fiancé was not in the limo. The wedding video flashes to a shot of the bridal party before the wedding. They were all posing for a photo. The bride, Amy, is in the middle, wearing the white silken robe, and her bridesmaids are all wearing matching red robes embossed with colorful flowers. They're smiling, holding up what looks like mimosas in glass goblets. At the back of the pack stood Mary Dyson. She was the tallest of her sisters, towering almost a head above all of them. Despite her height, though, the 33-year-old resembled Amy and Allie in every other way. That same blonde hair, that same smile. Mary was an Army veteran with a degree in civil engineering. She made captain, served in Iraq. According to her obituary, she'd helped build a girls' school there. She lived in Watertown, New York, near Lake Ontario, with her husband, Rob Dyson, and their son, who was just 3 years old at the time. She co-owned a construction company, and she also worked as a fitness coach at a local CrossFit gym. 34-year-old Rob Dyson grew up in New York's Finger Lakes region. Mary and Rob had met at Clarkson University, where they were both studying engineering. Rob worked for an engineering firm. He was a talented athlete. According to his obituary, he played football and basketball and ran track. When he died, he'd been a basketball coach at the YMCA in Watertown, New York. "34-year-old Abigail Jackson is the eldest of the 4 King sisters. She's visible throughout the wedding video. She's in the wedding party. She walks down the aisle. She's even seen tearing it up on the dance floor at one point. But there's a specific moment that stands out. Abby, as she was called, helps Amy fasten a bracelet on her wrist before the wedding. The pair of sisters could almost be twins, but Abby gazes at her younger sister with an unmistakable motherly pride. Abby was a reading teacher at a local school district. According to what a coworker told the Times-Union back in 2018, Abby had loved working with children, spent countless hours one-on-one with kids, helping them develop reading skills. Abby and her husband, Adam Jackson, had 2 daughters. They were 4 and 18 months old at the time. 34-year-old Adam was in the limo that day, too. At the time, he was a deputy commissioner at the Montgomery County Board of Elections. He was also a huge Yankees, Giants, and Star Wars fan. I'm going to quote from his obituary now because I don't think any summary that we could give would quite capture it. Quote, "Adam was unapologetically himself. If you knew Adam, you knew he wore his shorts in the winter and his favorite sweatshirt far past its expiration date." Unquote. It goes on to say that his 2 kids were his everything. Alongside his obituary on the Reflections Memorial website is a really sweet video of him dancing with his older daughter, who was then a toddler. We'll be right back. "12-year-old Jalique Rainwalker vanished without a trace from a small upstate New York village on a cool November night in 2007. His adoptive parents say he ran away. Police believe he was murdered, but a body has never been found, and a suspect has never been named.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah,
Appreciate
okay,
that.
all right, but you don't want to talk.
Then when I learned they were trying to undo the adoption, that's when I learned that this story was very complicated, well, a lot more complicated than I even thought.
Almost 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. I'm Jessica Marshall.
And I'm Wendy Libertor.
In this podcast from the Times-Union, we take a deep dive into the mystery of this missing child and try to find some answers.
So have you come to terms that Jalik is probably dead?
Yes. I feel that he was killed on November 1st, 2007.
Available now, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to Catastrophic Failure. Until now, we've only talked about the bride's side of the wedding party. Now it's the groom's turn. Axel Steenberg was 29 years old, and to hear his mom, Janet, say it, he was head over heels in love with his new bride, Amy. You can really see that love in the wedding video that she gave us, especially the clips of their first dance, which Janet says was miraculous given Axel's history with dancing.
Axel loved to dance. He actually broke his ankle like a half a dozen times dancing. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? One time he came home here and I heard him coming up the cellar stairs because they came in through the garage. And I hear crunch, 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 boom, crunch, 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 boom. And I'm like, what the hell? And I get up and here he is laying in the hallway trying to drag himself to his room. And I was like, what are you doing? He goes, I think I broke my ankle dancing.
Axel was tall. He kept his dark brown hair cropped short. He was muscular, thanks to an obsession with powerlifting. But his face was soft and youthful. He had an easy smile. He had a degree in electronic technology and worked as a process integration technician at the microchip manufacturer Global Foundries. Axel may have been clumsy on the dance floor, but he was rock solid when it came to competitive weightlifting. There's a video on the Reflections Memorial website from a competition that he entered. On camera, he deadlifts 460 pounds like it's nothing. His brother Rich Steenberg was 5 years and 1 day older than him. Rich and Axel were best friends. They had similar features, but Rich's were more mature and hardened. He shaved his head, had several visible tattoos on his muscular frame. The brothers did everything together. They watched movies, they played Dungeons and Dragons, they spotted each other while powerlifting, and they even worked the same job together at Global Foundries. Each was the best man at the other's wedding. Here is part of Rich's speech on Amy and Axel's wedding video.
One day we were obviously talking about flying sharks, so we watched the Sharknado series, right? That's what we were gonna do. So as we're halfway through the second movie of this cult classic, Amy walks in the door and completely interrupts our movie. Axel got up and left, and then I'm stuck there watching this movie by myself. So I did what any other older brother would do, and I watched the rest of the movie and lied to him about it, told him I didn't see it. That day, when Axel left, I was like, if he's gonna skip out on watching flying sharks with his older brother, he better marry this girl. And I want to...
He was always full of piss and vinegar.
Janet Steenberg remembers her elder son as a brilliant, fun-loving prankster.
Always coming up with some wise comment, gliding through the house in his socks and his boxers, singing Elvis Presley songs or the Buttercup song, or so just being really full of life. He was a hellraiser, big time.
Rich was married. His wife had planned to join the birthday party that fateful day, but had stayed home sick. They had an 8-year-old daughter together, and he had a stepson. There's several adorable videos of Rich and his daughter playing games and being goofy on the Reflections Memorial website.
Ronnie? Readers.
Rich and Axel had a large circle of friends. They met 27-year-old Matthew Coons at the gym. Matt served as a groomsman at Axel's wedding. You can see him in the wedding video, too. He was muscular and very tall. He towered over everyone. He had close-cropped blonde hair and bright blue eyes.
So Matt was usually in the gym once, if not twice, every single day.
That's Matt's mom, Jill Richardson Perez.
The child was born for sports. And I remember one day being in the house and faintly hearing, "Mom! Mom!" to come out in the backyard and find him way up on top of this tree, hanging by one foot that was wedged into the crook of the tree, totally upside down. That was Matthew. He had to just be investigating and trying things, and he was curious, and he was a researcher.
Matt enlisted in the Army and served for a short time at Fort Bliss in Texas. He was working in construction when he died. He was very close to his brothers and sister, and his mom says he made friends wherever he went.
At the funeral, this young man came up to me who I'd never seen before, and he had long brown hair, and his eyes were all red, and he gave me this huge hug, and he started crying. And I looked at him, I said, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Your son was my only friend. I don't have any friends, but I work at Stort's." And Matt came in one day and he talked to me and he said, "He just became my only friend, and we did things together, and he would talk to me and he'd help me."
Matt was starting to get serious with his girlfriend, 24-year-old Savannah Bersesi. They lived together, and they had a dog they treated as their child. He lives with Jill now. Matt and Savannah worked out religiously at the gym together.
I would have loved to have seen the man he became, because I know it was just getting better and better, and he deserved a better life. And Savannah was so good for him. I was so happy to see the two of them just together. And I'm thinking those two beautiful blonde kids that they were, I would have had the cutest little grandson.
Savannah was as petite as Matt was tall. She was an athlete to the core. She went to college on a volleyball scholarship. But she also played basketball and she ran track. She grew up the youngest of 3 girls on a farm in rural upstate New York.
I always loved Savannah, Georgia. I traveled the world. I just loved the name. So I got to name her,
That's Savannah's dad, Sam Bersesi. He says his youngest daughter's first love in life was animals, especially dogs. She'd just been accepted to a law school in Texas when she died.
Yeah, she was very, very headstrong, but it helped her in life. It was a short life, but it helped her with some of her decisions and some of the goals and things that she had accomplished. So
we'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
You're listening to Catastrophic Failure. The other passengers in the limo were an assortment of friends from both Amy and Axel Steenberg's circles. 29-year-old Amanda Rivenberg was one of Amy's best friends from college. They met at Plattsburgh State, a stone's throw from the Canadian border. Can you talk to me about their friendship, like what you observed, what were they like?
Chatty girls.
That's Donna Rivenberg, Amanda's mother. She giggled as she remembered hanging out with Amy and Amanda and their friends during visits to the school. Amanda had light brown hair, big brown eyes, and an infectious smile. She was stylish, she was outgoing, She was a competitive cheerleader when she was a kid, traveled all over for competitions. When she got older, she found joy in coaching cheer. She earned a degree in social work. She worked at a nonprofit in the Albany area providing support for adults with disabilities. Amanda was Donna's only child. She was fiercely proud of her. They were very close.
Now, if this hadn't happened, what do you think she'd be doing today?
She'd still be at Living Resources, being the voice for people that don't have a voice.
"31-year-old Patrick Cushing was connected to multiple others inside the limo. He was a childhood friend of Adam Jackson. They were roommates as adults. Patrick was godfather to Adam's oldest daughter. He also knew the King sisters from growing up in Amsterdam. And Aaron McGowan was his first cousin.
Well, he loved music, he loved sports, he loved adventure, he loved travel.
Patrick's father, Kevin, says his middle son was gregarious and popular. He had short reddish-brown hair, and he wore a beard in the Garibaldi style. He was small and athletic. He was an IT specialist for the New York State Senate, an avid photographer, and a world-class dodgeball player. According to U.S. Dodgeball, he led Team USA during the 2016 and 2018 Dodgeball World Cups.
Right before he passed away, the World Championships were at Madison Square Garden, and so we went down to watch that, and I'm walking around and with my wife Sue, and we just watching the kids, and we had all these people come up to me and say, "Is that your son Patrick?" And they're from different countries. I said, "Yeah." He's the nicest guy, and he might be one of the best dodgeball players I've ever seen.
U.S. Dodgeball retired Patrick's number, 98, after he died. In a Facebook post, they said, quote, "His no-holds-barred competitive spirit made him one of the most exciting and entertaining players to watch." Patrick was dating 26-year-old Amanda Hulse. They'd met online and really hit it off. They'd just moved into an apartment together in Albany with their 2 cats.
She and Patrick had been together for about a year, and she was lovely. A great addition to Patrick's life. Hopefully Patrick was a great addition to her life. I love the relationship they had because they did have different things they'd like to do, and they didn't force the other person, like, I want to go and pick flowers, because she loved flowers. She loved sunflowers. They just had a really complimentary relationship. She was wonderful.
Amanda grew up in the Adirondacks, a protected mountain range between New York's capital region and the Canadian border. She had long, wavy brown hair and big blue eyes. She loved flowers, especially, as Kevin just mentioned, sunflowers. She worked part-time as a floral designer and an artist. According to her obituary, she also had an inspirational tattoo on her foot that said, "Never give up." "34-year-old Erin Vertucci McGowan was Patrick's first cousin. She had light hair and blue eyes and a big, bright smile. One of her other cousins told the Times-Union in 2018 that she was, quote, constantly recording her adventures through life. She posted on social media a lot. They also said that she hated winter, but she loved spending time at her family's camp in the Adirondacks. She was a proud dog mom to a black and white Boston Terrier named Remy. Erin worked in record keeping at an Amsterdam hospital. She was studying to earn her master's degree, and she just married the man that she called the love of her life, 30-year-old Shane McGowan. Their wedding was 4 months before the crash. Erin's mother-in-law, Sheila McGowan, delivered a victim impact statement at the sentencing of Nauman Hussein in May of 2023. During her statement, Sheila spoke of the last time that she saw her daughter-in-law. She'd picked Erin and Shane up to drive them to Amy and Axel's house on that fateful day.
When Erin got in the car, she said, "Sheila, you'll be so happy to hear that it's been a week since we both stopped smoking." Erin wanted to stop at one of the convenience stores to get something to eat. When she got out of the car, I noticed her skin glowed and how shiny her hair was in the sun. When she got back in the car, I told her how pretty she looked, and she just smiled.
Sheila also said in her statement that her son had been beyond excited the day before. He proudly told her that they had just gotten pre-qualified for a loan to buy their first house. They were planning to start a family soon. Shane worked as a hearing specialist at Miracle Ear. He had a business degree. He had dark brown hair and a short beard. His mom called him her brown-eyed, handsome boy. He was a huge Yankees fan. He even went to the 1996 World Series and saw them beat the Atlanta Braves to take the title. He was a video gamer. He was close with Axel Steenberg, and they frequently played with a close-knit circle of gamer friends, some of whom were in the limo with them. One of those gamers was 34-year-old Michael Ukai. He was a retired Marine. He joined up right out of high school, did 2 tours in Iraq, saw active combat. His base was mortared. An IED exploded in front of him. He saw friends die. He moved back home to upstate New York after a medical discharge. He worked at GameStop, and he sought care for severe PTSD. He was renovating his family's home on a lake when he died. Michael's mother, Mary Ashton, said she received a Facebook message one day during the trial of Nauman Hussein in May of 2023. It was from a former Marine named Nick Vasquez. He'd served with Michael in Iraq. He said Michael saved his life.
Nick wrote, "I don't remember the date, but it was a heavy attack that night. It was the worst one we had. Everyone was running everywhere and it was pretty hectic. But in all honesty, Ukai came up to Singleton to check on us. Cool as a cucumber. I remember being scared out of my mind and kind of running around, spazzing as well. Ukai came up and calmed us down and got us to safety where we needed to be." And Nick had also said, "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for your son. My wife, my children are so grateful to him. He's a hero. He should be remembered as such." It really touched my heart.
The final limo passenger was 30-year-old Rachel Cavosi. Rachel was an athlete. She earned a scholarship to play soccer at University of Buffalo. She was a Class A all-state goalie in high school, also the New York State High School shot put champion. She had dark brown hair and an electric smile. She worked multiple jobs. She was a dental hygienist, a bartender. She volunteered at a local peace pagoda. She was spiritual, studied yoga and Reiki, and she refereed school athletics in her spare time. No one that we asked could quite pinpoint why Rachel had been in the limo that day. None of the reporting on her over the years revealed any real concrete connection between her and the other passengers. We were unable to speak to her family. Other limo families we asked weren't certain. Some thought she was a friend from college, others a work friend. But Rachel did not go to school or work with any of them. According to other friends, she didn't seem to have known any of them very well.
She is, or was, absolutely ubiquitous, right? She was just everywhere all the time.
One of her longtime friends, Erica Latham, did not know exactly why Rachel had been in the limo, but knowing Rachel as she did, she says she could guess.
It is not surprising that she was on that limo, because of course she was. People thought so highly of her across several counties, as it turns out, that of course someone would give her a limited seat on a limo for their birthday.
Erica thinks Rachel may have worked with Amy Steenberg at some point in their adult lives. But Erica had known Rachel since childhood. They both grew up in Troy, ran in the same circles. Rachel was a constant presence in her life.
My mom's birthday one year, I think this was 2014 or 15, and my whole family, intimate gathering, we're out to dinner, but out of like a mist, Rachel appears. And that always happened. She just always just showed up. And she sat in between my parents on my mom's birthday, which was, it wouldn't have been surprising for Rachel just to sit on my mom's lap, just like, she just was part of everyone's family.
Erica says that when she came out, a pivotal point in her life, Rachel was one of the first people she told.
What do you think she would be doing today if she were still alive?
I think she would be absolutely beyond pumped for spring. The whiff of a 50-degree day, she would be at one of our local haunts, maybe Ryan's Wake or something. It's a bar here in Troy. They have a great balcony, and she would just be out there, looking into the sun, looking at the river, and people would just gather around her. I think she would be at the Peace Pagoda, getting ready to, watch the flowers pop up. I think she would be looking forward. She was very excited the last few times I saw her about her future.
Now, that's all the limo passengers. But there were 3 more people who lost their lives that day in October of 2018. One of them was the limo driver, 53-year-old Scott Lisinickia. Scott had short, curly brown hair and a beard that was peppered with wisps of gray. He was tall and lithe, with a light brown complexion. Scott was born in the Bronx, to a Sicilian father and a black mother. He had a twin brother, Keith. They were 5 minutes apart. The boys all grew up in Ballston Spa. They lost their younger brother to a heroin overdose just a year before Scott died. Scott lived in Lake George with his wife Kim and his 2 stepchildren. Scott and Kim had met a decade earlier when he came into the Elks Club Lounge in Saratoga, where Kim tended bar. They hit it off and had been inseparable since. A couple years later, after a hip replacement, Scott decided to quit hauling. He became an Uber driver and a part-time driver for Prestige Limousine. Scott's twin brother Keith Lisinickia told reporters in 2018 that his brother was easygoing and kind. His wife, Kim, told the Times-Union that Scott was the love of her life. The last 2 people who lost their lives on October 6, 2018, had no connection to anyone inside the limo. They weren't even from the area. They were just bystanders, stopping for lunch on their way to a family wedding in town. 70-year-old James Schnarr was a retired carpenter. Originally from Long Island, he moved his growing family upstate to Ulster County in the Hudson Valley in the 1980s. He wanted more space in the country, so he built the house that he shared with his wife, his 2 daughters, and his 3 sons.
He was strong-minded. He read quite a bit, and we always had something to talk about.
Daniel Bogan remembers that he didn't always see eye to eye with his father-in-law on politics, though.
And we might not have always seen things the same way politically, but we could always find some kind of mutual understanding, I think, and talk about things peacefully. He was definitely a person of integrity and clear thinking. He was sharp and very pragmatic, very practical. And I think, from carpentry and having to get a job done, and provide for his family. There was no time for dilly-dally and,
James Schnurr had 3 grandkids. There was a 4th on the way when he died. 46-year-old Brian Huff was married to James's oldest daughter, Jackie. He was a geology professor at SUNY Oswego. From his picture, he looked every inch the light brown-haired, blue-eyed, mild-mannered professor. But he was hardcore when it came to 2 things: rocks and beer league hockey.
He studied geology, so rocks for jocks. So we could pick on him about that a little bit, and we goofed around. But it was really more about climate and isotopic analysis, and he was doing some really cool things.
Dan Bogan got along really well with his brother-in-law, he says. They were both self-described science nerds.
Brian was a goofball. He was a fun-loving goofball. We goofed around all the time. In some of the earlier years, we spent a lot of time playing Rock Band and way into the evening. Like one of these things where, we got to go to work the next day. And next thing you know, it's 3:30 in the morning. I'm like, whoops.
What was his instrument of choice?
He was pretty good with guitar. And then I played the drums and once in a while would sing or.
Brian had one son who was 8 years old when his father died. It's been about 6.5 years since these 20 lives were lost. Some of their loved ones have found ways to move on with their lives. Others, well, they're still consumed by grief. But they've all found ways to keep the memories alive of those they lost.
Bench here, and I planted tulips, and this year they were beautiful. They were yellow and purple. Oh, wow.
Jill Richardson Perez created a small, secluded garden in her yard in honor of her son, Matthew Coons. When her granddaughters visit, they like to add little gnomes and fairies to make it magical.
Because you're secluded, you're away from everybody. If you want to get you have to come out here with coffee sometimes. It just kind of came in and sat. It's nice.
Donna Rivenberg helps to memorialize her daughter Amanda by staying connected to the organization that she worked for, Living Resources. Living Resources gives out an annual award to recognize employees who go above and beyond. After Amanda died, they named it after her, and Donna helps give it out each year.
I had a few people come up to me and say, "You're Amanda's mom?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I didn't know her, but I see her picture around the office and she still inspires me."
We have more about the lives of these 20 individuals over on timesunion.com. Please, I urge you to go read more about them. Before we finished this podcast series, Larry Rulison and I looked for some closure. This is our final planned episode of this show.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like, and you can correct me with your own opinion, but I feel like this story's kind of come to a close in a way. There's not much more to say. There's not much more to report, right?
Yeah.
Where are you at with all of this?
It's very interesting. I mean, for 5-6 years, it was daily obsessing and working on this story, ups and downs, and it really took a lot of time, effort, and emotional toll on me, and I know you. And so, but I do feel like there's some sense of closure, or I've reached the end of the road. It's that sense of okay, I can move on now, and unless something else comes up with Dauman and all that, or Shahid. Right now, it's just it's sort of the end, and I've sort of been able to establish my regular business beat that I had sort of neglected for a long time. And
That was what you got into journalism for, right?
and it got I got reinvigorated with that. And I'm glad to be able to like focus on what my job is here. I'm a business writer.
Right.
So, you know.
Well, that's what a lot of the families told us too, is that like after the trial ended, after the conviction, the sentencing and all of that, like a lot of them said we could finally breathe again and like start to think about moving on with our lives, which, in a similar way, you spent the last six and a half years just like every day nose to the grindstone on this story, like, to have that same kind of, sense of, okay, conclusion, breathe, moving on.
Yeah. Next chapter.
Of course, we thought that we'd told all that we could of the story of the Schoharie limo crash at that point. But in the first week of February of 2025, Prestige limousine and chauffeur service operator Nauman Hussein asked the state's highest court to overturn his conviction. And then in early March, an attorney for Michael Ukai's family filed an amendment to their existing lawsuit against Mavis Discount Tire. The family's attorney says he's found evidence that Mavis employees lied to police about what they knew about the brakes on the 2001 Ford Excursion. What happens with all of that, we cannot yet say. But if there's anything new to report, it'll be on timesunion.com. Catastrophic Failure is a production of the Times Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall. Original reporting by Larry Rulison. Editorial direction and fact-checking by Erica Smith and Casey Seiler. Our theme music is Undercurrent by Harper Ray.